Testing 1, 2. What's going on? This is Marcus, and in today's video, we're going to cover a real important topic. Today's topic, we're going to cover government, state, and local retirement funds and how they work. I can speak to this because hey, I work within various branches of the government. So we're going to talk a little bit about the retirement funds for government employees, how they work, so you can know how to make your money work for you. Before we take a deep dive, if you're interested in following my debt-free journey and learning more about finance, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and definitely hit that like button. And also, before I get started, hey, I wanted everybody to take a look at the shirt, at the merch, Make Smart Cool. It's not my merch, this is my guy's merch, a buddy of mine who I went to high school with. And it's just so many people I know who are out there doing their own independent entrepreneurial hustle and just trying to support everybody. So if I said I'm gonna get a shirt from you, I'm gonna get a shirt for you. I just gotta order because we gotta make sure that budget game stay tight. Now let's talk about how this thing works. We're gonna have a little bit of board work today too. That's why I'm standing up. Okay, so now we at the board. There's a little bit of shadow. I was working on this whole lighting thing, but let's just go ahead and get the info out. Hopefully the edits can clean up that shadow. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is essentially, when you're a state employee, local government employee, this is how your retirement is designed to support you. So let's just imagine your retirement years once you're 65 as a chair, and you got to sit down in that chair. There's essentially 3 legs on this chair that is supposed to give you balance during your retirement years. The first leg is Social Security. We'll put an SS in there for Social Security. The second leg is going to be your pension. And then the third leg, which we'll put over here, is supposed to be either your TSP or your employer 401k plan. So essentially how these things work is all of these 3 things are supposed to supply you with some sort of income so that when you hit that age of 65, you decide to hang it up, you'll be good to go because you have 3 things. You have your 401k plan, which is a certain amount of money you've been putting in the marketplace. You have your employer pension, and you have your Social Security. Now this is where I'm going to kind of be realistic about some things. So, just take it for what it's worth, but make sure you check your state, your government agency to kind of find out what the plan is. But me, Social Security, I'm going to just go ahead and put an X through Social Security. The reason I'm going to put that X through Social Security is essentially Social Security is a program that's already running out of money, it's running out of funding. So right now, every time the tax code get made and big corporations are given the tax break, and the taxes on the middle class and lower income persons are increased, which we'll see when the Trump era tax cuts for the middle class expire at the end of this year. But Social Security, you really can't rely on Social Security being there. If you're like me, you got 25, 30 more years where you could possibly work and stack up that retirement money. There's really no guarantee that the Social Security is going to be there. Now I hope it's there. Hey, I even pray that it's there because a lot of people need that. People have been paying into that since they've been working, so they should be entitled to at least the money that they put into Social Security. But how it works, the money that you work and earn now, the Social Security that's paid, is essentially paying for this generation of people who is receiving Social Security. So Social Security is government funded. It's going to be a question mark. We're going to put a question mark right there because it may be around, it may not be around, we don't know. Now let's take a look at the pension. Let's talk a little bit about the employer pension. This is actually interesting because this varies with where you work. If you're a federal government employee under the new higher end retirement criteria, they do have a pension where you get a certain percentage of your income every month. But if you're with state, local, some municipalities, you may have to look into this. I will tell you, I actually work for a local government agency that they had something similar to a 401k. They had, and it was interesting because they had an employer match and you could contribute, but when you reached the age of retirement, you didn't have any pension. So think about it. Had I worked to age 65 at that agency, I decided to actually retire, I would only potentially, if Social Security is still around, I would potentially only have 2 legs to balance my retirement seat that I want to sit on. I would have had the 401k that include my contributions and the employer match, and I would have also had Social Security if it was around. But that job didn't have a pension. So remember, your retirement is up to you, and it's never too late to get started, because again, we can't really rely on the government too much, because they're a little shaky with it, and you may work for an employer who may have a 401k option for you to invest in, where you can contribute to, and they'll maybe put up a match of either 3 to 5%, but they may not have that pension, which is similar to a job I had where they didn't have a pension. So it really puts your 3-leg approach to retirement is in jeopardy when you are missing one of these other support systems that are there to essentially, hopefully, give you some structure during retirement. Now, what we're going to talk about today is the 401k. We're going to talk about the 401k, how it works if you're a government employee, and it's generally the same across the board. There will be some differences and some nuances. Okay, so now we're talking about the federal government's TSP plan, the 401k, is analogous to the 401k essentially, and we're going to talk about how it works. So, with the TSP plan, and I think when some people started back in the day, they used to automatically contribute you at 3%. So with your TSP, how it used to work, and I think this was a recent change, but how it used to work is when you came in, started as an employee for the federal government, they would automatically enroll you and contribute in 3% of your salary. Now the federal government would automatically give you a 1% match, and then they'll match you up to 4% based on whatever you contribute. So if you contributed 3% because you came in, you never adjusted anything, they would automatically enroll you and contribute in 3% of your salary. Then they would contribute 1% and they would match you 2% to essentially give you a 3% match. That 1% that they're going to do automatically, plus they're matching you 2%. They can match you up to 5%. So that's really how the TSP initially started. It looks like there's some language where recently when new employees start with the federal government, they actually start out and mandate that you have a 5% contribution is automatically set up. Now you can go in and adjust that and reduce it or increase it, but it looks like they're automatically setting you up with 5%. So in turn, you'll get that 5% match. So essentially 10% of your income would be going towards your retirement, your TSP, or your 401k, as some people would like to call it. Now, let's talk about how that is broken up. And this is a really big part. When you initially start out, your money will go to what they like to call the G fund. Yep, and I know I didn't have to write that on the board, but I just wanted to write this G on the board. But your initial contributions will automatically go to the G fund. Essentially what that means is that you automatically contribute in the percent that they allocated, they match you up to 5%, all of that money goes into the G fund. So let me explain a little bit about the G fund. I like to refer to the G fund as G for garbage. I'm not going to say it's hot garbage, but I will call it garbage. I wouldn't keep any of my money in the G fund. I don't keep any of my money in the G fund. But essentially with the G fund, this is the safest, most conservative, investment that you can put your money in. This is where they automatically put your money at. So I can tell you, just based on some independent research, the G fund is guaranteed to give you a return and you'll never lose money, but the rate of return for the G fund over the past 10 years has been about 2%. So you stick all your money in the G fund, they match it, it goes into the G fund and it's at 2%. Now here's where it gets important. It's on you to actually go into this fund and change the allocation. So you definitely will want to change it from the G fund. The only way you really want to use the G fund is as you get closer to retirement. So let's say you started in the government at 20 and now you're 60, you to allocate a larger portion of your portfolio, your contributions to your TSP, your 401k, to that G fund, because now you're kind of in that preservation stage where I want to preserve my wealth. I don't really want to leave a large percentage in the market where it could fluctuate or go up and down. That's really the only situation you should be looking at putting money into the G fund as you near retirement and you're on that I want to preserve my capital and preserve my wealth that I accumulated. Outside of that, you really never want to use the G fund. The onus is on you. So when HR gives you this big old packet, they'll give you this big old packet, and you have to go in there and change it. Now, interestingly enough, I actually talked to a homegirl of mine who work in HR, and you would be amazed at the amount of people who work for state, local government, federal government, municipalities, and never log into their TSP account. They don't know how much money they have. They don't know where their money is. Think about it. You work 35 years, 30, 25, 20, 30, all these many years in the government, and you never looked at your retirement, and you left it in the G fund only making 2% interest, which doesn't even beat inflation. And I'll put a link above to a video where I talk a little bit about inflation and how that works. But your money loses value based on inflation at 3% a year, and you only made 2%. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other funds that are included in the federal system that gives you options to invest your money. So let's go ahead and take a look and talk about these additional funds that you can invest in. Okay, so the next fund that we're going to talk about is the F fund. I don't really got a name for the F fund. I don't know. I would say F would be, it's kind of a so-so fund. It's the second less conservative fund, so it's not as worse as the G, but it's definitely not the best fund. But essentially, the F fund tracks U.S. bonds. And so right now, if you look, considering what's going on with the market and the risk of inflation, bonds are going up. Anytime inflation is a threat and becomes an issue, you kind of see the price of bonds go up a little bit. So the F fund right now is probably doing better than it historically does because it's tracking bonds, and bonds are going up because the market is kind of going down, just because a lot of people are selling off because of this whole, they're scared of inflation, and Jerome Powell and his speech today didn't help. But essentially, it tracks the bonds. Now let's take a look at some of the numbers related to the F fund. The lifetime performance of the F fund, they have online listed at 6.8%. It definitely beats inflation, but it's definitely less than what the market does. So again, this is a safe place to put your money, where you'll get a return that likely and will beat inflation. But that return does track U.S. bonds, Treasury bonds, so you want to stay cognizant of that. I'll tell you right now, I don't have any of my money in the F fund. Again, this is one of those funds where as you get closer to retirement age, you want to preserve your capital, preserve your wealth. It may behoove you to start to transfer some of your money from some of those more riskier funds to some more conservative funds like the F fund, where again you can beat inflation, get a return, and there's the risk of loss is definitely less than it would be if you were in a more aggressive fund. Remember, this fund doesn't guarantee a return. So unlike the G fund guarantees a return. This F fund doesn't guarantee a return, but it is the next safest bet to preserve your capital if you're in the federal government and you want to think of a place, where can I put my money at and what fund can I put it in where I'll actually preserve my capital. Now let's take a look at the C fund, the good old C fund. I like the C fund. You see I'm smiling when I'm talking about it. But the C fund is essentially a fund that tracks the S&P 500. If you aren't familiar with the S&P 500, I'll put a link where I go over Stock Market 101. It'll explain everything. But essentially, this fund tracks the S&P 500. If you look at the 1-year return on this fund, is actually 18.9%. That's 18.9% in year one. If you look at the lifetime return on this fund, it's 10.9%. This 10.9% is actually on pace with the lifetime returns for the S&P 500, which is made of the 500 largest companies out there. Your Teslas, your Microsoft, your Googles. So if you're looking for a place to grow your money, definitely beat inflation, you want to look towards the S&P 500. Remember, this is a little bit more aggressive fund. There's some risk here. It doesn't guarantee that you'll make money, but if you think of the market as a whole, the market averages about a 10.9% return. Over the last 10 years, the S&P 500 has actually averaged a 13.9% return. So this is a great place to put your money. And remember, as you get closer to that retirement age, you can take a little bit of your money that you have in a C fund, put it in those more conservative F and G funds to preserve your capital, but still keep a smaller portion in your C fund so you can continue to make money as the market goes up. Okay, now we're going to talk about another one of my favorite funds, the S fund. The S fund essentially tracks the Dow Jones. So we'll put Dow Jones, and just for those of you who may not know, the Dow Jones is essentially a group of the 30 largest companies out there, those blue chip companies. This is another fund just like the C fund that allows for a very generous return. On average, the first year of this fund, they have listed at 31.8%. That's crazy. That's year one though. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted thinking that that's the lifetime return. Year one is 38.1. Year one is 31.8%. The lifetime return on this is about equal to the C fund. You have a 10.8% return on this particular fund. So if you are coming into the government, you have, and this is for the federal government, but a lot of the state and local municipalities break down the same way. If you're coming into the government, you're just starting out and you say, hey, I want to move my money. One, definitely look into your investment account. Do not take that package from HR and just sit on it and do nothing. Look into it, open it up, log in, get your password so you can take that money out of that general fund and actually use that money to make you some money. Now, again, the ones I focus on, and I'll tell you what I have in mind, where I like to put mine is the S and the C fund. Those are where you get your biggest returns. I do have a small percentage, like maybe 10% in the G fund, and I just keep that there just in case it's ultimate market collapse. And I'm talking about where everything collapses and martial law is out and we out shooting zombies and it gets that bad. At least I have something then. But then my guns will probably be more important than any money I got in the fund, but that's neither here nor there. I typically like to stick around the S fund and the C fund for growth. Again, as you get closer to that retirement age, you want to start to move a percentage of those funds to your more conservative funds like your F fund, and then last your G fund, because now you're looking to preserve your capital. There's one more fund, well there's a few more, there's two more, not one, there's two more funds that I need to talk about. Okay, the next fund I'm going to talk about is the I fund. Can we all guess what the I fund is for? International. The I fund is for Europe, Asia, all those other markets that are overseas. So I'll tell you how I normally use this in my portfolio, because if we just look at the stats and historical numbers, the U.S. market destroys the Forex 90% of the time. The U.S. market makes more than the Forex. It's just, you can't challenge that because that's a statistic. But again, the name of the game is diversification and a way to protect your money if the market takes a downturn. So I normally put about 10% of my money into the international stocks just to kind of keep things honest, just to have something a little bit different, provide a little bit of diversity. Now let's talk about some of the numbers associated with the I funds, and it's consistent with what I just said. The first year return on money invested in the I fund is about 8.9%. That's year one. That's year one, you'll get about an 8.9% return. But if you look at the lifetime return on the I fund, you're only talking about 5.9%. So this is really just for diversification purposes. I keep a percentage there, not because the expectation is that, oh man, I'm going to make a whole gang of money in the I fund. I already know what it is. I'm looking at the numbers, but I keep it there to keep things diverse. to give me a little bit of protection just in case the U.S. market takes a downturn, or in the alternative, just in case the euro market and the overseas market has a big upturn. So those are essentially the categories of the funds that you can get when you're in the federal government. And that applies for every government agency. Now, it may be called something different. It may be called North Carolina Large Cap Fund or Georgia Small Cap Fund. But essentially, if you go click on the link, it'll give you the details. And you want to look for those things that track the Dow Jones Industrial, the S&P 500. That's where you're really going to get your growth from. Now, the last fund I'm going to talk about is the L fund. I'm not even going to really write anything because the L fund is really simple. The L fund is essentially a targeted fund where if you want to put your investments on complete autopilot, go with the L fund. You can't go wrong. So let's say you start out with the government, you have 30 years until you retire. They'll have an L fund that says L fund expected retirement 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, and you can just take a look at, okay, I expect to retire this year. Now when you put your money in that L fund, it's actually unique because it's designed to grow your money early on, so you'll be in those more aggressive S funds, C funds. But as you gain experience in your government career and you get closer to retirement, those investments get a little bit more conservative. Well, that's it. That was a deep dive into government retirement funds, how they work, and how best to make them work to your advantage. I appreciate you all tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment. Peace.